All right, welcome everyone to First Gen Professionalism, our First Gen Professionalism event. My name is Anthony Jackson, and I will be presenting, myself and Holly will be presenting today. First thing we want to do is introduce ourselves, let you know a little bit about us and how we are first generation. So I'll take a second to go ahead and talk about my first generation experience, and then Holly will follow me with hers. Um, but like I said, I'm originally from Mississippi. I had three siblings, and I'm the first out of the four to actually go on to work on a degree. Come from it. I didn't come from a very large town. It's very country, Jackson, Mississippi. Enjoyed a lot of in the woods type activity. So we were definitely out on the farm with uncle and things like that. So I come from humble beginnings, so to speak. When I got to my first experience going to college to sign up for college, it was very interesting because I had this mentality of this is going to be a quick 30-minute experience and I'm going to excel to the world. I'm going to go do it. But it really wasn't that. I walked in the computer lab where the actual program chair and dean was. I didn't even know who those were when I walked in there. And I walked in there and I told them, I said, I want to study jazz. And that's all I want to do. So they looked at me, the program chair was looking at me, but the dean then lifts her head and looks at me as if, do you want to handle this or do you want me to handle this? So in that computer lab, I got a thorough rundown of how my matriculation through college would go, from the general education to classical background training, and then you get to do what you want to do in your major or concentration. So that was a great learning experience for me. That was a great experience for me, but I also had, in all things, you have bad experiences, or I choose to take them as experiences that motivate me to complete. So my one experience in education that I had was dealing with a professor who did not believe I could achieve a bachelor's of science in psychology. And it really hurt me at the college that I was at. But I transferred to another college and actually completed that degree. So I actually let her motivate me in actually achieving what I wanted to do. And through me moving through that or not letting that hurdle stop me, I believe it made me a little bit more stronger to be able to tell my story today. And that was prior to me being in higher education. But since I've been at Ivy Tech, I've been afforded a number of opportunities to maneuver around the company and do a number of things that have greatly developed my skill base, my knowledge base. But I just feel that I've been afforded some wonderful opportunities. But that's what brought me to now, and I've gotten all the way up to a master's of science in management. So as I go through life, I always try to refer back to my goals. What am I doing this for? Why am I trying to achieve this? What is it really going to benefit me in the long run? Okay. So that's definitely my story and how my first gen experience in trying to navigate the higher education world, not knowing much about it, not coming from a strong background in that manner. So um, I'll hand it over to Holly. You want to talk about your first gen experience?
Absolutely. So mine was a little bit similar in the sense that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or what to expect. So I was the first person in my entire family to go to college, not just my parents, but no one in my family on either side had gone to college. No cousins, siblings. Like, I'm the oldest of three children. So
Mhm.
no one in my family was able to kind of navigate that process with me. They were very encouraging, they were very supportive, and I'm very thankful for that, but they couldn't really help me in the sense of what to expect for college and getting through that whole process. And then it was the same in regards to the job search too. So even starting to look for jobs as I was getting ready to graduate with my bachelor's degree, I had no idea where to start. And my parents wanted to help me, but they really didn't know how they could. So my dad, he has worked as a machinist in a factory for the last 35 years. And he didn't have to do the job search. You know, it had been over 30 years since he had an interview. And when he did, it was just one interview, you got the job, and then he was there for 35 years. And with my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom. And so she had been out of the workforce for over 20 years by the time I was looking for my first job in college. And so she had, before she became a stay-at-home mom, she was actually a manager at an insurance company. So she was able to give me a little bit of guidance and support in terms of professionalism and what to expect. So in that sense, I got a little bit of that professionalism realm and what to expect in working in an office setting and how to conduct myself. And for my dad, I really got that work ethic from him. He really instilled those values to work hard, do your best. So they were able to contribute to my job search, but in terms of the technicalities of it, they had no idea. They weren't really able to help me along the way. And so those were things that I had to figure out myself, just kind of through trial and error and different experiences that I had applying for jobs and going on the interviews, and then just really learning from my capstone course, which I feel like came way too late in my academic career. So really the point of our presentation today is to give students tips about things that we wish we had known when we were in college before we started the job search, because I think these are things that will help first generation students, but also students in general. So no matter if you have people in your family who have been to college before or not, I think this is information that is good for all students to know, especially as you get towards the end of your academic career and are looking to make that first big jump into your first professional career. So all of that to say, that was today's presentation. We want to give you the tips and the advice that Anthony and I wish that we had had, especially in terms of going into a job search. So we're going to get into this. We've got it broken down into a couple categories. We're going to talk about the job search strategy. We'll go into some resume tips, and then we're going to close it out with how to conduct yourself in an interview. And we'll have some questions along the way. And as we're going through this material, if you guys do have questions, let us know. And I'll also do a disclaimer that I tend to talk pretty fast. So if I'm going too fast, just let me know and I'll slow it down.
Yes. Yeah, that'll be our signal. See if we need to slow it down. Okay.
I like it.
Definitely, you know, along the same lines for me. This is my first time doing a presentation of this magnitude with the college. So I, even from my adjunct teaching, I still think that this is would be a larger audience that I'm reaching right now. So definitely butterflies and nervous, but we're going to get through this. We got it. We got this. We got this. We got this. Okay, so let's start with talking about job search skills and what that consists of. What we're going to, after we're done with this portion or this section of the presentation, we want you to be better able to conduct a job search in a very targeted career or industry location, like not just searching random careers or random industries to see what's available, but having a targeted goal of what you're looking for. Ensuring a professional online identity, looking at items that you want to collect to be included in your job search portfolio, and also identifying references that you would use in a job search. Next slide. Additional things are discovering job leads, how networking is a powerful job search tool, looking at explaining appropriate behaviors that we should use during the job search process, and then summarizing the importance of maintaining the right attitude during the job search, okay? So first thing, a successful job search strategy is going to include creating a plan. This plan does not have to be in a Word format. You can actually do it in a journal. You can do it, write it down, and make a plan on what you're actually looking for. So we're going to talk about what that plan looks like. Conducting research. It's talking about if you're going up for a job in administration, what specific area in administration might you be going into, or what, if you're in the healthcare field, what specific area in the healthcare field do you want to really narrow or filter that job search down to, that research on that, and then taking action, performing those steps to apply for those jobs. Okay. The job search also identifies the type of job you're looking for and tools and resources and their use. Okay. Next slide, please. Choosing the right career. When we talk about self-discovery, this is where you want to talk about where you take assessments. Typically, you can get these tools within our Hire Ivy. If you use your My Ivy account, these same tools will be provided through our Career Connections and Employment Department. So we can definitely, we will definitely refer you to that also and put that in the chat. But you can take assessments that will tell you what your strengths are, what some weaknesses are, things of that nature. So learning what your power words, what your specific power words are that describe you. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so a realistic job preview, what does that look like? It's going to identify day-to-day and common tasks for that specific job. We know that more so as a job description. So you want to really look at that job description that's listed when you're using search tools such as Indeed.com, Hire Ivy, and there are a number of other databases out there that help you search for these jobs. You want to identify what you need on the educational side, what certifications you might want to do, what degree path you might need to choose, and you can actually have conversations with this about with your academic advisors also that can help you identify these things. Other requirements, if it's specific to driving or a financial job, you'll definitely want to know you have a good DMV history or know how to get that DMV history up to par where you can get that job, and then looking at your credit history and knowing how to use resources available to bring that credit history up to where it might need to be for, let's say, a job in finance, okay? Because sometimes well, most times when dealing with money, it is typical that they're going to review that, okay? We're going to also talk about here creating a career summary statement and what that looks like, okay? Let's go to the next slide, okay? So let me ask a question. What career area do you believe suits your skills and experiences? Does any student, would you like to chime in on that currently? What career area do you believe suits your skills and experiences?
Currently, administrative assistant, probably.
Okay, thanks, Kyle, for sharing. Have you had the chance, do you currently work in that field or are you looking to get into that field?
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, looks like you might have frozen.
Okay, no problem. Kyle, are you looking to get into that field or currently working in that field?
Yeah, I'm doing something similar, but all the job, sorry, my internet's kind of unstable right now. I don't know if
no problem.
You can hear me. The job descriptions I look at that I'm interested in, yeah, a lot of them are similar to what I already do. So and usually that's like administrative assistant jobs.
Okay, awesome, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else, would any other students like to share? Okay, let's go to the next slide. So looking at identifying the industry, so Kyle made a point to identify the administrative area. When we look at industry, so we have administration across industries. And when we talk about industries, we're talking about education is an industry. Then you have the retail is an industry. You have Holly, would you care to chime in on industries, additional industries?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's education, there's a healthcare field,
Yeah.
there's IT. Those different industries are going to be really anything that is like the core. You know how you have majors at college, the industries are going to be kind of like your majors, if you will, outside in the professional world.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, so we definitely want to look at finding what skills we need in order to get that job that we have a goal of getting. So definitely one tool that we have on here is the ONET database you can use to search different industries across different jobs. So definitely take either take a screenshot of that or jot that down in your journal or notebook so that you can use that for future references when you're looking for identifying different industries. Okay. Okay, so we want to look at discussing the difference between a job and an industry. The job is the industry, we'll stick with higher education. So we'll say higher education would be the industry and the actual job within that would be something, my specific job that I do as an assistant director within a company, okay? So that's the difference between searching for a job versus looking for a job within an industry, okay? Questions? Okay. So the targeted job search typically is what leads you through our process of identifying open position and target employers. So telling you where you want to work, your cost of living, the average cost of basic necessities, things of that nature, okay?
All right, so I'm going to take it over for a little bit at this point. So another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're in a job search is your online identity, especially nowadays. That's really important. Hiring managers, before they even start calling candidates in for interviews, a lot of times they're going to do some online research. So they're going to look at your social media accounts, they're going to look at LinkedIn, they're going to Google search you. So it's very important that your online identity shows a very positive professional side of you. So if you've got things where you've got drinking and all kinds of derogatory comments on your social media posts, those are things that you probably want to get rid of. In general, it's probably not a good idea to have those things on there, but especially when you are in a job search. So making sure that, especially as you begin your job search, that you do a Google search with your name to see what's out there, and also do a skim of all of your social media accounts to kind of get rid of the things that don't necessarily reflect you in a positive light. So if it's not something that you would want a potential employer to see, just get rid of it, or make sure that you do have your account set on private so that other people can't see that information. You also want to think about your email address. So as employers are reaching out to you to schedule job interviews with you, you want to make sure that you've got something professional. So either using your Ivy Tech email address or your first and last name at gmail.com. Something simple, something basic. Stay away from like Party Mama 666, those types of things. Not exactly. Those are not the things that employers want to see, nor do they want to know about you. So make sure. I know, and we've seen it all. I used to work in the career development office, and some of the email addresses that students would put on there, it was a trip. So make sure that even with your email address, you are putting forth that positive professional image. Same thing goes with your voicemail. A lot of times students will have not professional voicemails at all, or they will not have anything set up, or their mailbox is full. And so especially in a job search, you want to make sure that you're getting those calls and employers are able to reach you. So make sure that you do have a professional voicemail message on your phone, so that when those employers are calling, they can leave you a message if you don't answer the phone in time.
So no YG or Madonna playing in the background while you have the while you're recording over that with your voice. It should not be no background band.
Not needed for this one. And then the other thing that you want to keep in mind is avoiding text or slang when you are corresponding, especially in email, making sure that you are using proper grammar. And if you are unsure, just kind of having somebody take a second look before you send that email, because this is a potential employer. So make sure that you're putting forth your best first impression there. In terms of starting to gather some of the materials that you'll need in the job search, you want to make sure that you have some professional references that you can use. And these are going to be people who can just kind of back up and verify that you would be a good candidate for that position. So you want to reach out to former coworkers, supervisors, people you volunteered with, your instructors, people who you have a professional relationship with, who know a little bit about your skills, your education, and a little bit about your work history and what you have to offer. You want to try to stay away from friends or relatives, because those are really people, while they can say nice things about you, they may not be the best people who are going to hold a little bit more credibility, because they might be a little bit biased. You know, my mom is always going to say good things about me no matter what.
Well,
So yes, so keep it to those professional references. And you want to make sure that you give those people a heads up. So ask permission, make sure it's okay that you use them as a professional reference, because those employers will reach out and they're going to find out information about you. So one, always ask permission from those references. Make sure that you're using professional and not friends or family. And then always make sure that you're reaching out to someone who is going to speak highly of you. So you don't want to reach out to somebody who you left on bad terms with, where they can badmouth you. In the same regard, you don't want to reach out to somebody who has no idea what your skills are or what your work experience is actually like. So make sure that you're being strategic in who you are choosing as references.
Just to piggyback on that, Holly, to add another category in there, people that you may not have talked to in 9 to 10 years, old, maybe old professors that don't really know, like you said, don't know where you are. Yeah, might know. You might want to definitely give them a heads up, and definitely an updated resume as to where you are and what you've completed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. That is definitely good information to keep in mind, because yeah, they may not remember you. You may not be as special as you thought you were. And then with your references, those are something that you're going to have prepared, but not necessarily something that you're going to give to every employer. You're only going to provide those if the employer asks for them, or if it's part of the application process where you have to upload those. So they're not going to go on your resume, which Anthony will talk about in a little bit. And you really only need them when the employer specifically asks for them.
Hey, Holly, can I
yes.
jump in with a question real quick from the chat?
Absolutely, yes.
Would you recommend updating email addresses if the student or the job seeker has a name change?
So I think that's a really good question, especially if you are going by Holly Wonder and your email is like a maiden name or a married name. It's always a good idea to do that, but it's not necessarily something that you have to do, because that's easily explained, or if you don't want to explain it, you don't have to. But with those email addresses, I would say that you want to use one that you're checking. Especially in a job search, you want to be mindful that whatever email address you use, that's the one that you check most often. Yeah. Does that make sense?
For sure. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So another thing that you want to start gathering is letters of recommendation. And a lot of times this is not required, but it's optional. And it can definitely help set you apart from other candidates. And what this is this is a letter written by somebody in your professional or personal network who says, yes, this person would be great for this role, and this is why I think they would be great. And they can talk about your skills, they can talk about your experience, who you are as a person, whatever the case may be, but they're going to give good information to those employers to really back up the case of why you would be a good fit for that role. So kind of along the same lines with the references, when you ask for letters of recommendation, you really want to tap into your professional network and talking to previous or current employers, coworkers, instructors, volunteer experience, just talking to somebody who can give the relevant information needed for those. When you are looking for jobs, you can get job leads from a lot of different areas. So if you know that there is a company that you really want to work for, or that you know you would love to be part of that organization, targeting their website is a really good place to look for the jobs that they have open. But you can also just look at job boards. You can look at social networking sites like LinkedIn. Those are all really good, easy ways to find those job leads. Industry journals or associations. So a lot of industries have their own organizations that you can be a part of. So like higher ed, they've got the National Association of Professional, I can't even remember what it is now, but they have different memberships for pretty much any industry out there. So a lot of times they will have their own job boards, or they'll send private messages to people who are in that organization, letting them know of different job leads. So that could be helpful as you are looking to apply for different jobs and want to get your foot in the door somewhere. Those memberships or organizations are a good place to do that. One of the absolute best ways to find jobs is through your professional network. And we'll touch more about that later, but I would say over 80% of all jobs are actually found through networking and through people you know. So that is going to be very important in your job search. And that's probably where most of your job leads are going to come from. And then some other ways that you can look for job opportunities is through your internships. So whether your academic program requires you to do an internship or not, I would definitely encourage you as a student to at least complete one internship. This is going to help you gain experience, and it's also going to help grow your network, and it could lead to a permanent full-time position down the road. So internships definitely have a lot of benefits to them. And then job fairs. That is one of the easiest ways to get in front of an employer, where you can actually give them your resume, talk to them one-on-one. And a lot of times those recruiters at those job fairs will either do on-the-spot interviews with you, and we've had interviews in the past where students have gone to a job fair, they've talked to an employer and walked away with a job. So that happens. And even if you don't get an on-the-spot interview, they will oftentimes schedule those interviews. So job fairs are a wonderful way to get in front of that. And the Career Office actually had a virtual career fair today. And they do that from time to time, where they'll have small recruiting events. So as you are able to, I would definitely encourage you to check those out because that's going to be a great source for different job leads. All right, your professional network as promised. So networking is probably the easiest way to find jobs nowadays because a lot of times it is not what you know, but it's who you know. And so they can really help you get the foot in the door at different positions and different organizations. So in a broad, simple terms, networking is basically using those professional relationships that you have and using them to help get your foot in the door somewhere, or to be able to help other people in your network. It's a two-way street. So you're not just taking from them, but you're also finding other ways that you can help them as well. And your professional network consists of pretty much anybody that you know, friends, family, people you know from college, whether you're your classmates or your instructors, academic advisors, previous employers, people you met at job fairs, clubs, organizations, volunteer work, and the list goes on and on. So basically, anyone that you know can potentially be in your professional network. One final thing before we wrap up and move on to the resume section is that when you are looking for a job search, you do want to think about your privacy and know that there are scammers out there who are going to try to get your personal information so that they can steal your identity. Unfortunately, we live in a world where that does happen. And so just be mindful that employers are never going to ask you for personal information like your social security number, your date of birth, or anything like that. Any personal information that they have from you is going to come from the application that you fill out or your resume. So they're going to have that information that they need. They're not going to need anything else beyond that. And another thing to look out for is if you are receiving emails from a potential employer where they're asking you to send money, or if it sounds too good to be true, like you can earn $5,000 a month working from home, just answering phone calls, things like that. If it sounds too good to be true, chances are they are. So just keep that in mind. And if you're ever unsure, you can always ask somebody either at the college or the career office just to kind of take a look before you actually respond to those emails. So I know that was a lot of information. Any questions before we move on to the next section? All right, I will turn it over to Anthony so we can talk about resumes.
All right, so some meat and potatoes. Come on, the resume package. I've had the chance to talk about this a number of times, so I'm definitely excited about this. So let's go. Resumes. And this is going to be broken up into sections, so we're definitely going to talk about the sections of the resume. But one thing you want to make sure your resume is, make sure it's accurate, appealing, and it's effective. And we're going to discuss how you do that as we move through this presentation, the next section of this presentation. Okay. Through this section, you'll be building up, we're going to teach you how, or show you how to build a powerful resume, communicating your clear objective or personal profile using those power words that we talked about earlier. We're going to really delve off into those power words and what those sound like. Identifying how you can effectively share your resume. Also, we'll talk about developing a cover letter, what methods we should use to tailor our resume, and addressing any special circumstances or time gaps. We'll talk a little more about that. Okay. So what does the resume package look like? It's a cover letter and your resume, to be in very simplistic form, cover letter and a resume. The resume is going to consist of basically your written profile. Just like you have to fill out a profile when you're on online websites or various apps, you have to do a profile, a written profile, a formal written profile. And this is going to tell the employer what knowledge you have of the job, or your knowledge base according of that job, your skills you have developed over time, and your abilities to work with these potential employers. Okay. Conflicting advice yeah, you can go ahead. Go ahead. So we're going to look at gathering the 5 steps toward a winning resume. Is going to talk about gathering information, creating an information heading, and utilizing the proper layout, because it's not what we typically think it is. Sometimes we think that we can just use the Microsoft Word resume template, but that's not always correct. Then we're going to talk about writing a skills summary or a personal profile, and we'll discuss the differences between those on the resume, still just talking about the resume, and where to put those skills, accomplishments, and experience. Okay. Next slide, please. So step 1, when we talk about gathering information, you could do this on a blank Microsoft Word document. I do not recommend using a template, once again, because it can get a little confusing, because it varies according to the template you choose. But when you're creating your draft document of your resume, you want to have these sections: education, skills, employment. If you have taken any, or if you speak any different languages, you can have a section for that, a section for honors and awards, and then a section for your professional and community involvement. That's always an important piece. We're not including personal information on this item. That's going to be the difference between the online app profile and your actual resume, your profile. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what should we have in that information heading? What should it look like? It needs to be your most current contact information. So Always keeping it up to date and current at all times is going to be beneficial when you're at a virtual fair, virtual job fair, or a in-person job fair, or you meet with somebody, a potential employer. So definitely having that information up to date. So always have the name on your paper resume. I would recommend having the name, mailing address, city, state, and zip code, contact phone, and an email address. If you're going to upload that to a online entity, I would only recommend on that resume including your name, contact number, and email address. I would not suggest putting your personal home address on that specific resume for security reasons. Okay. And before you, like I say, before you get ready to upload it, you want to make sure you check it for grammar, spelling, and accuracy. The squiggly lines are not just decorations; they mean we need to do something. So, some things that we can do to check these areas are use Grammarly. Typically, I believe that's a free item. We can use Grammarly. Spell check is also in Microsoft Word while you're doing it. So, just clicking on those two simple things can kind of save a number of areas and teach you where you need, or show you where you need to update some things. Okay. We're going to go back one second, Holly. We're also going to look at checking the format, capitalization, and punctuation, why that'll be important. Okay. Go ahead. So what does how do we arrange this information properly? When we look at it, we want to look at our functional resume is going to look at emphasizing relevant work skills and education, used for entry-level positions. This type of resume is used for entry-level positions, and it uses a skills summary statement, and it's typically 1 page. So your resume does not have to be 2 pages at this point, especially if you do not have a lot of work experience. So you would use this type of resume, functional resume layout, in order to let the employer know what you have relevant to your skills and education, okay? Or we have the advanced skills layout, which tells us about an extensive career, or if you've already had a background, let's say you've been working in healthcare for a while, you would use this advanced skills set layout to lay out what employers you have worked for across a number of years, and what you emphasize related work experience, skill sets, stress major accomplishments and responsibilities. This specific resume will use a personal profile, and once again, we'll talk about what a summary statement and a personal profile is up ahead. Okay, but the advanced skill set layout is typically 2 pages or more. Okay, next slide, please. Both resume layouts present employment history and education, but it's in the reverse chronological order. So the most recent work history or your most recent job will be the first on the list. Okay, always use bold when you're doing the job title. When listing the work history, bold the job title, not the employer. Okay. When listing employment dates, you want to only use the month and the year. And some of this is not, some of these items are like bolding and month and year are typically general things that people expect or interviewers would expect to see. So definitely want to be consistent in laying out the dates and the tense, okay? And avoid using those templates. For the reason they may have too much color, we want to stick with a simple layout bullet point format so that the interviewer or the employer can see the history, what you've done. Next slide. Okay, so now what's the difference between the skill summary and personal profile? Both of these statements are used to relate to the target employer, target career, introduce key skills, and express interest in a position. So a skill summary is used for those who have little to no work experience. The personal profile is the advanced skill set resume, which is used for more extensive career experience. Now let's delve into that a little more. Go to the next slide, please. So a skills summary example would read, highly motivated and positive person seeking to obtain a position as an office professional with Roxy's clothing company that will enable me to utilize my current customer service skills and office assistant education. One for the medical field would read, to obtain a medical assistant clinician position at Health Corps where I can demonstrate and increase my current medical assisting skills, such as pharmacology, laboratory, and diagnostic procedures. So you see the skill summary goes a little bit more in depth with that work career because they've been in that field just a little bit longer. But I can say I did start out with the first initial one at first when I first did my first resume. It was very short, very simple. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, now your personal profile, when you're developing that, that's going to be 2 or 3 sentences, statement that provides a snapshot of your professional qualifications in a manner that sells your knowledge, skills, and abilities. So that would sound something like, highly professional and detail-oriented accounting professional with a demonstrated leadership and success in the areas of payroll, collections, and project management. Okay, possesses excellent analytical, communication, computer, and organizational skills, bilingual, English, Spanish, read, write, and speak. Okay.
Maybe while Holly's pulling that back up, if you want to answer Ginny's question, Anthony.
Yeah, definitely. I was just pulling that up. I think that the the question is thinking about resumes and LinkedIn profiles. What are your opinions on how similar these should be? I do believe that these should be very similar in terms of your keeping them up to date, making sure that they both are giving the same message. So definitely your profile statement or your objective listed on the resume can also be used on LinkedIn because there is a specific section on LinkedIn that enables you to upload that. And I believe now you can actually upload your resume and it'll extract certain parts to help update that profile. So definitely use that as a tool to help beef up that LinkedIn profile. And it could possibly lead to a number of other networking opportunities for any of our students. Yep, for anyone.
Absolutely, I agree with that. I think they should match, but I think with LinkedIn too, I think it gives people an opportunity to kind of go into a little bit more about their passion or why they're in their field or they're in an industry, or kind of give a little bit of background about who you are as a person. I know in my LinkedIn, I kind of touched on that I was a first-generation college student, and I tie it into just trying to help guide students because I know firsthand what it's like to not understand the college process. And so with my role now, I'm able to help students navigate through college. So I think it gives people an opportunity to give a little bit more background on who you are as a professional than just your resume or maybe your cover letter might be able to do too.
So we were right at talking about skills, work experience, and professional accomplishments and what those sections should look like. So skills are going to look at the skills relevant to the job that you're targeting first. If you have customer service, that's typically a good transferable skill that moves across a number of job skills. Typing and proficiency levels. So be specific when you're mentioning those things. When we say specific, if you mention how fast you can type, give a specific number like 60 words per minute, 70 words per minute. So really give them an idea and don't be broad with it. Work experience, we're going to look at including what you've learned on the job, what those job duties were, accomplishments from what you achieved while being paid, unpaid, or in volunteer areas. So all of those things tie into and build you as a professional. So quantify when possible, give those dates, what you were responsible for, things of that nature. Okay, next slide. When we talk, and make sure when you list these skills, make sure they're specific to the job industry or the job that you're looking at. So an example of that, a medical billing clerk who knows how to use specific software programs such as medical managers would not need to use this skill if he or she changed job to become an elementary school teacher. Does that make sense? Okay. Next slide, please. Transferable skills are the ones that can be transferred from one job to the next. So even if you change careers, you still will be able to use these skills at the new job. An example I have here is sticking with the same medical billing clerk. They may have learned how to input data into the computer, or for billing purposes, if he or she becomes an elementary or school teacher, these skills can be used to report student data in a computer system or to analyze reports that they may have to look at as teachers, okay? And in the virtual world we're in, those skills will definitely come in handy. Soft skills. These are things, these are skills that are necessary when we're working with other people in the workplace. So being reliable, being dependable, being a team player, having good communication skills, knowing how to work in a team as well as work on your own. Your attitude, how well you get along with others on that team, knowing how to give, what's the criticism, knowing how to tactfully criticize or give etiquette, provide etiquette to someone on that team, and not just saying it as if you're chilling with one of your friends. So definitely those skills come into play, but being able to list those and being true about you are definitely even better. Next slide, please. So we typically, when looking at these bullet points, you will not have complete sentences. You want to write with energy and use action verbs. These are the power words we're talking about. Instead of saying, I started an accounts receivable system, or I started a program, you'll want to say, I developed a new accounts receivable system that reduced turnaround time by 20%. So really delving off into, if it's from a customer service perspective, you want to say, I developed a customer service model that reduces our wait time by 20 minutes or by 30 minutes. What did you do to contribute to that specific job skill that you're talking about? Okay, next slide. Some additional examples for power words we're going to look at, and you might want to write some of these down for future use. Ideal, being an ideal person, ideal oral and written communication skills, understanding, establishing, maintaining, accurate typing skills, experienced with, and listing those software systems that you've worked with or possibly went over in class. You may be taking a class working on that, increasing that skill, knowing how to list that skill and explain that in that bullet point, okay? I think we have some more examples on the next slide. Some more power words: excellent, accurately, strong, excellent, again, maintaining, positive attitude, motivated, and organized. So these, I would definitely say, if you want to take a screenshot of these, definitely use these power words to enhance and add life to what you're trying to say when you're creating these examples or creating these skills, or listing these skills. Next slide, please. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We talked about the bolding, talked about that, okay? These are some more additional power words: prepared, enjoyed, established, maintained, proofread. those bolded words are definitely ones that you want to try to incorporate into your skills description. Okay, next slide, please. So when we get to step 5, we look at making sure we review and give a thorough check to our resume. Now that we've gotten all of these different pieces together, we go back and review each section, and we're looking to make sure, checking your information, heading for complete and accurate information, reviewing skills summary or the personal profile, ensure that it introduces and motivates the employer to who you are as a person, as a student, as a job seeker. Encourage the reader to learn about your specific knowledge, skills, and abilities and accomplishments. Okay. And we want to review appropriate and proper resume layouts, which confirm your subheadings, consistent setups, and always checking the spelling and grammar. So making sure those subheadings are not offset too far. It doesn't form a path down the page. Make sure everything is consistent down the line. Bullet points. I'd say stick with bullet points. Next slide, please. Lastly, some completion tips, listing experience and education chronologically. So right back at the completion tips, making sure that we're staying consistent, spacing, not having things all over the place when developing that resume. Next slide, please. This next one is talking about the proper formatting, underlining, bolding, and italicizing for emphasis only. Like I would only use the underline, bold, and italicize for the sections of the resume, such as your objective, your professional experience, work experience, honors, certifications, and things like that. Only use black ink, so we don't want to send hot pink or red or orange to an employer. Stick to black or blue ink. I would say black or blue ink when you're dealing with resume in the Microsoft Word. We don't want to have anything that's going to strain the eyes. Use an easy to read format. Do not send 24 font to the employer. That is not what you want. Stick between, I would say stick with 12 to be on the safe side, 12 to 14. Don't include a 8x10 photo. We definitely don't need that. No birth date, marital status, social security information, none of that. And do not list your references. Do not say references available on resume. They will ask you that. If they will ask for that item if they need it, okay? Next slide, please. Some things that I reiterated at the beginning about the online version, making sure you consider using content use words, sending your document as an attachment, PDF file or Microsoft Word, looking at electronic job boards, and guarding your personal information. Okay. Cover letters. This is the second piece of the resume package. So this is very simple. I'm going to actually, after I'm done talking about it, I want to share one that I've done already, provided we have time. If I'm going over time, let me know. But the cover letter is the formal letter used to introduce the resume. So this is what your employer is going to see first before they even look at the resume. It's typically friendly but professional tone, and it points out how you can meet the employer's needs, but it is not a duplicate of the resume. Next slide, please. So it's in 3 easy paragraphs. The paragraph 1 will look at the purpose of the letter, talking about the specific position in which you're applying for, and how did you learn about that position or learn of that position, whether it was a search engine, whether you were referred, or things of that nature. Paragraph 2 is going to look at, is going to refer them to the attached resume. It's going to highlight your qualifications and skills that you talk about in that resume, and it's going to communicate what you can offer to that employer. And paragraph 3 is simply your request for the interview, state a follow-up, and be courteous. Okay, I'm going to share my screen for 1 second, Holly.
Absolutely. I think you should be able to.
Yep, got it. So right here is where I have done a resume on my end. I use this as a template when I'm going over it in class. but I just simply put my name, Office of Human Resources, dear Director or Hiring Committee, please accept my letter of interest, resume, and professional references for consideration of the job opportunities aligned with, Assistant Director of TRIO. Josh, you probably saw this already.
I was gonna say, this looks familiar.
Yes. So it works, people, it works. Yes, it works.
Yes, it works, yeah.
I'm a witness. The second paragraph goes into as you will see, my work experience has allowed me to demonstrate my abilities, oversight, projection, interpersonal communication between faculty, staff, and a diverse student body. I have the ability to influence a team to accomplish a goal or complete a mission. The third section is optional. I just kind of got a little wordy right there and went a little overboard. And then this last paragraph would actually be your third if you don't have the optional section. So thank you for your consideration. I look forward to speaking with you in the near future. You may reach me at, and you list your numbers and email. Sincerely, and your enclosure, okay? Okay. So in the cover, so we're looking at carefully reviewing the job announcement to identify what job skills you're needing, and you want to highlight those in that cover letter, letting them know you are the person that they're looking for. I can handle this job. So you want to mention the target company by name. In my instance, it would be Ivy Tech. So I specifically mention them by name, list specific qualifications that will delve a little deeper into what makes you an excellent candidate, okay? And include a number that you're reachable at, not a house phone that you never monitor or, or something that you might not ever pick up, okay? Okay, next slide, please. Additional tips, although it is acceptable to use I and my in the cover letter, be careful not to begin most sentences with the word I when you're doing that. Address it to a specific person, again, fulfilling that goal that you're trying to, or fulfilling your goal that you're trying to locate a job. So address it to a specific person, human resources, the program chair, hiring manager, someone in that hiring area. Refer the reader to the resume, request an interview at the close of the letter, and display initiative. So you're going to have to do some follow-up after you submitted that resume, maybe call them or contact them or send a follow-up email to them, okay? So tailoring your resume and cover letter, we look at identifying skills for your targeted position using ONET, listing skills first on the resume, emphasizing specific qualifications in the cover letter, list the phone and email addressed on the resume, and make phone message professional. This is really a portion I wanted to emphasize, how to talk about your gaps. And even if you deal with a not so good background, maybe you might be an ex-offender, the good case is to be honest. Don't mislead the employer. If you have gaps in your resume, you'll definitely want to list only the years instead of months, instead of the months and years, so that you can identify a skill you've learned during those gaps. But back to ex-offenders, you can list jobs that you held, skills that you learned, and things that you gained while you may have been incarcerated during that time. Any groups that you may have dealt with or been a part of to make your application, to show initiative that you are actually trying and that you are doing what it takes to get this job, okay? So be honest, don't lie on the employment application. You can check yes, and write will explain during interview. You don't have to divulge everything right there on the paper. You can explain it during the interview. Okay, next slide, please. All right, we're turning it over to Holly for interview techniques.
Awesome. All right. So once you have your job search strategies laid out and you've got your resume and your cover letter, your letters of recommendation, all of those great things,
Yes.
You're going to start getting those calls from employers to get those interviews scheduled. And so when it comes to the interview, preparation is key. The more prepared you are, the more confident you're going to be, and the more likely it is that you're going to get that job. So we're going to go over some basic tips and things that you should keep in mind when it comes to the actual interview itself. And we'll talk about things you should do before, during, and after the interview. So when you get those invitations for an interview, most of the time you're going to either get a call from the employer or you're going to get an email from the employer. And so that's why we just want to reiterate, it's really important to be checking your email and make sure that you have a voicemail box set up so that employers can reach you and leave messages if needed. When you are invited to schedule an interview, there are a few things that you do want to ask. If you're able to talk to the person on the phone, you might want to ask how much time should you anticipate the interview to be? And then how many applicants are being invited to the interview, or how many people are going to be on the interview committee? Those are some things that are just kind of helpful for you to help you prepare. I always like to tell students that when I was fresh out of college, one of my very first job interviews that I went on, I was expecting the interviewers to just be 1 or 2 people. And when I walked in, it was a room full of 10 people sitting at the table, and I was not expecting that, and it completely threw me off my game. I bombed that interview. I did not get the job. And a lot of it was because I didn't feel prepared and it just caught me off guard. So asking questions like that is going to help you feel more comfortable and more confident going into that interview. So if you are able, those are definitely some questions that you want to keep in mind and ask the interviewer or the person who's scheduling that interview. If you're able to, you want to try to schedule your interview for the first time slot given or the last time slot given. So typically what happens is those interview committees, they are in interviews all day long. And so when it first starts, they've got a lot of energy, they're excited, and then their energy kind of wears off through the end of the day. But if you can't be that first interview, we always recommend being the last interview of the day, because those first and last interviews are the most memorable to employers. Everybody else in the middle, unless you are a rock star and have a lot of energy and are super memorable, chances are those employers are not going to remember you.
Tap dancing. That always works.
And then you also want to make sure that you know who is interviewing you. And this is for a couple of reasons. One, you can do a little bit of digging on LinkedIn to learn a little bit of information about those people who are going to be sitting in on that committee, if it's just one person or multiple people. And then 2, you're going to want to write a follow-up thank you card to all of those people on that interview. And that's just going to help you in the long run, and we'll kind of touch on that more shortly. Also, before you get ready to go to the interview, you want to do some basic research on the company. And I'm not saying you have to write this huge long paper and just find out everything you can. You just want to know some basics so that when you go into that interview, you can kind of drop some things that you know about the company. Like, oh, I saw that you guys are expanding and you're getting ready to hire a bunch of new people, whatever it is. But do some basic things so that you can learn a little bit of information about what they're working on, what their basic products, their services are, and then also looking at their mission and values. That's something that I always encourage students to do, is if nothing else, if you don't do any other research, at least go onto the company website, see what that company's mission is, what their values are, and try to incorporate that somehow into the interview, how you really align with the way that they treat their customers, or you really align with something else from their mission and their values.
Yeah.
The next thing that you want to start to prepare is what's called an elevator pitch. And this is basically a 30 to 60 minute spiel about your experience and why you're a good fit. So you want to focus on your skills from either your education, you want to focus on your previous experience, what you're looking for, just anything that's going to quickly tie in why you're a good fit for the position that you're applying for. So this, if you want to take a moment to read through there, that would be for somebody who is looking to interview for an accounting position. In this statement, it's going to give brief information, but it's pretty comprehensive. So we see that they've got a degree in accounting. We see their goal is to become a CPA. We see that they enjoy working with budgets. They know a little bit about the company. They talk about their work ethic, some of their top skills like being organized, dedicated, responsible, and then just kind of closing out that statement, saying your company is committed to its clients and our community, which is why I would like to be part of your team, and then kind of flipping it back where it can go on to the next section of that interview then. You also want to prepare what's called the interview portfolio, and this can be an actual leather-bound portfolio that you use, or it can be as simple as a pocketed folder. It can be very simple, but the basics are you want to make sure that you go into that interview prepared and you have the things that you need. So some types of things that you want to include in that would be if you have any kind of awards that you can just print out and include with that, like if you were on the Dean's List or you were Employee of the Month, any kind of recognition that you want to include there. Certifications, like if you have your CNA license, that might be something that you want to include. Resume, cover letter, references, letters of recommendation. But at the bare minimum, you want to make sure that you've got a pad of paper, a pen, your resume, cover letter, and references. And then really everything else is optional, just making sure that you've got things. So as you're having that conversation with employers and they're asking you questions, you can kind of pull from your portfolio and show them how awesome you are. Probably the most important thing about preparing for an interview is to actually practice some interview questions. And this is something that you're going to want to spend quite a bit of time on. And if you just do a quick Google search for commonly asked interview questions, you're going to get a whole range of questions. And so just kind of going through some of those and thinking about how you would answer those questions is really going to help you feel prepared for that interview that you go into. So as you're answering those responses, you want to think about your skills and you want to try to think of specific examples that you can use when you're answering those questions. So for instance, if somebody says, what kind of communication skills do you have? You can say, oh, I've got great communication skills. It's one of the things that I really excel in my current job. I communicate with clients on a daily basis through email or phone calls to making sure that they've got their needs. I also do some public speaking. I do presentations for students. So just really kind of being brief and concise, but also saying, yes, you have this skill. Here's how I've used this skill, and here's how I could use it in your organization. So it's more than just simply saying, yes, I do have communication skills and just sitting there in silence waiting for the next question. You do want to give enough information, and that's where it gets kind of tricky, is because you want to find that balance where you're answering the questions, but you're not rambling and going on too long where they're all sitting there looking at each other like, okay, time to wrap up. So just kind of be mindful of that and kind of finding that sweet spot there. But the more that you practice those questions, the more comfortable you're going to feel. And if you ever want to record yourself, you can definitely do that just with your phone or your laptop. And then the Career Office actually has a website called Interview Stream, where they actually have pre-recorded interviews that you can practice and see how you're responding to that as well. So that's definitely a great resource that you can use too.
Holly, can I ask you a question? Can I ask a question out of the chat right quick?
Absolutely.
What would you recommend in place of a handshake, since we have virtual interviews going on right now?
That is such a good question. So if you're doing a face-to-face interview right now, I think people are kind of along the lines where if you're not doing the handshake, they're probably okay with that. You can just simply say, you know what, with the virus, I just don't want to catch anything. I don't want to spread anything to you. And people are okay with that. With the virtual setting, it's just one of those things that just kind of bypass, fortunately. Like if you're in a virtual setting, you can just say those greetings and introduce yourself without having to do that handshake. So I think either way, whether you're in a virtual setting or you are in a face-to-face interview, it's completely okay to bypass that handshake right now. And I think people are going to understand that.
We have one more question that I think would be a good segue into your next segment, which is talking about an internal versus an external candidate and how those work with organizations. Because sometimes as internal candidates, we might take for granted that people might know us very well, or we think that they know everything, or they know everything about me. However,
Yes.
that's not the correct attitude to take when going into that interview. We want to make sure we act as if we are an external candidate with that first initial, that wow factor, making sure we have that those descriptions. And I believe as an internal candidate, you should know a lot more about the position as opposed to those external candidates. But that's not to say that external candidates shouldn't do their research to find out what those companies' goals and things are. Do you have anything to add to that, Holly?
I do. I think you hit on a lot of good points. But I think as an internal candidate, you definitely have a huge advantage. But it's very easy to get cocky. So you want to make sure that you are looking at it like you are an external candidate, and just kind of go in, prepare, do your best, and don't think that you're just going to get your shoe in, because you're not. Even though there are external candidates and you have the advantage in knowing the company, maybe knowing some of the people who work there, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to get that job.
Correct.
So just preparing and just knowing that you do have a competitive advantage and using that to your advantage, if you will. So kind of tying in like, yes, I have a network. I can tap into the people that I know here to help me do this job, but also focusing on those other skills and other areas in your background that you can bring to the table. Because knowing people in the room and knowing the organization is not enough sometimes. So in a roundabout way, does that answer the question?
I would agree that answers the question. That gave a good answer to the question. Thanks, Amanda and Virginia, for putting that in the chat. We're going to have a question and answer session, which I want to come back to some of these questions and answers. So I'm going to let Holly go ahead and segue into. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. I'll keep rolling, and then we'll have more questions at the end too. So before the interview, it's always a good idea, at least the day or two before, to actually check out where you're interviewing, because traffic can be an issue. Sometimes you might think you know where you're going, and then when you get there, you're like, oh, I don't know where I'm at right now. So that happens. So it's always a good idea to prepare ahead of time, make sure you know exactly where you're supposed to be, know where you're supposed to park, how to enter the building, where the interview is going to be located. And make sure that you have your interview attire already laid out, or at least know what you're going to wear, because you don't want to be rushing around the last minute trying to figure out what you're supposed to wear to this interview. A note on interview attire, you want to make sure that you are dressed to the nines. So if you're going on a professional interview, make sure that you have a suit, a collared shirt, or if that's not in your budget and you can't do that, you want to dress as nicely as you can. So a nice pair of khakis, a button-down shirt, you can definitely do that as well. So the day of the interview, you want to make sure that every interaction that you have with everyone that you encounter is a positive one. So just kind of think that as soon as you walk in the door, that's when your interview officially begins. So making sure that you smile and are polite and friendly to anybody that you come into contact with, because a lot of times the hiring manager will ask people who they know that you've had some interaction with what their initial impressions were of you. So just kind of keep that in mind. Make sure that when you get there, you introduce yourself, you take a seat, and try to avoid using your phone or getting distracted, and just kind of mentally prepare yourself. Take deep breaths, do some positive thinking, that you can make sure that when you walk into that room, it's game on, you've got it. During the interview itself, you do want to pay attention to body language. You want to pay attention to both your body language and the body language of the people who are on the interview committee. So for yourself, you want to make sure that you are sitting straight up, your back is against the chair, your feet are flat on the floor, and you want to be relaxed to kind of make sure that you're staying calm and focused is really going to help you. So if it's one of those things where you just want to put a smiley face on your padfolio to remind you to smile and keep the positive energy going, whatever you have to do, do it, but make sure that you are just trying to stay calm and focused throughout that interview. You want to make sure that you're making eye contact with everybody who is on that committee. And again, always going back to balance, you want to make sure you're making eye contact, but not staring like a psychopath. So somewhere in between is always good.
No googly eyes.
Yes, no googly eyes. And then when you are answering those interview questions, it's okay to take a moment to collect your thoughts because sometimes you'll get a question that you didn't prepare for, or you'll get a question that just kind of throws you for a loop, and that's okay. That's bound to happen. And so you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what is being asked from you. And it's okay to say, that's an excellent question. Let me take a moment to think about that. Now, saying that, you have a few seconds to collect your thoughts. You don't have 10 minutes to think about that. But that will at least buy you some time as you're trying to think how you want to word that answer. And again, any question that you have, you want to make sure that you are relating it to the job itself and what those qualifications are. So making sure that you're prepared as you're looking through the job description, that would help you identify what potentially would come up. So if you're interviewing for an instructor position, you know that things along teaching are going to be definitely high on the list of things that are going to be related to those questions. So you want to make sure that you are keeping your answers brief, but giving enough information so that you are answering that question. And examples are going to be the key things. So make sure that you have specific examples that you can cite of how you've actually used that skill in the past or in your current position. And then anytime that you can name drop, let them know that you know a little bit about their company is going to help show them that you did take the time out of your day to do a little bit of research, or that you have a basic understanding of who they are and what their company is about. The talk about yourself, I think that comes up in every single interview. I don't think I've ever been on a job interview where the interview didn't start with, tell me a little bit about yourself. And that oftentimes, especially as students, we don't know how to answer that question. And so we'll immediately dive into our personal lives. So how many kids we have, how long we've been married. And that is not at all what the employer is looking for. So with that question, think back to your elevator pitch, because that is exactly what they want. They want to know your professional background, what your top skills are, what your education experience is like, and what you're looking for in a job. So always revert back to the elevator pitch for that tell me about yourself question, because that will come up. And if you can at least nail that, that will hopefully give you the confidence to get through the rest of the interview too. So again, whenever possible, looking at specific examples of both your work background and what you've done in an educational setting too can be related to that as well. So with interviews, a lot of times, especially nowadays with everything that is going on, a lot of times employers will do either a phone interview or a virtual interview before they actually do the face-to-face one. And so with those interviews, sometimes it's nice because you can have your notes set aside where you can kind of quickly glance down and say, okay, these are the topics that I want to touch on. These are things that I really want to make sure that the employer knows about me. But again, you want to treat that as a professional interview, whether it's by phone or virtual, you want to give it the same seriousness approach that you have going into that face-to-face setting. So make sure that you're professional, make sure that you're prepared, that you're communicating well, and really just overall, you want to make sure that you're being polite and friendly and putting forth that energy that's going to kind of put you over the edge. And same thing with video chat interviews, especially now we're seeing more and more interviews being conducted by Zoom or in a virtual setting. And so those are kind of nice, but there are different distractions and things going around in the background that you may have to work towards. So especially if you know beforehand that you have a phone interview or you have a video interview coming up, make sure that you're planning ahead for that. So make sure that you've got a space set aside where you can actually do that interview, where you're not going to have distractions. And two, especially if it's a video interview, you want to make sure that you're dressed professionally as well. So even though you may be sitting in the comfort of your own home for a job interview, whether you are at home or in person, you're not going to go to work for that interview in your pajamas. So make sure you look presentable, you are professional, and really taking it seriously, even though it may just be by Zoom. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. And by this point, I think we're used to being in a technology setting, but making sure that you are making that eye contact with the camera and that you're not just looking all over the place and not paying attention because you are speaking to an actual person during that interview. Closing out the interview, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they don't have questions prepared that they want to ask the employer. And so a lot of times at the end of the interview, the employer will say, okay, what kind of questions do you have for us? And sometimes students or people in the interview will say, you know what, I think you answered everything. And that may be the case. They may have answered all of the questions that you had on your mind, but you at least want to think of one or two questions that you can ask them. Because if you say you have no questions, a lot of times the employer is going to take that as you're not interested in the position. And so you don't, unless you're really not, you don't want to make that mistake. So the types of questions that you want to focus on are really going to be geared towards what it's like to work for that company or the position itself. So questions like, what's it like to work for your organization? What is the culture like? Or what does a typical day in this position look like? Who would I be reporting to? You want to stay away from questions that are about how much am I going to make? How much vacation time do I get? Things along those lines. Those are all things that will come up after you have been offered the position, but in the interview itself, that is not the appropriate time to do that. And then closing out the interview, you do want to restate your interest in the position, ask them questions about when can I expect to hear from you? Are there other steps in the interview process that we need to take? Just kind of reiterating that you are still interested in that position and you're going to do whatever it takes to go through those next steps. This is a very, very important part that a lot of people don't take the time to do, and it's very simple. But it really does make a big difference, is writing a thank you note. So immediately after that interview, you want to take time to either handwrite a card that you can deliver and just kind of pop in and put it in their office or give it to the secretary or whoever who might be able to deliver it for you, or sending a quick email. That's appropriate too. But you definitely want to take the time to thank the interview committee for taking time out of their day to interview you, get to know you, and just kind of reiterate again that you are really interested in the position. All right, so I know that was a ton of information. So now what we want to do is open up the floor to you guys. What other questions do you have, things that we've talked about, or maybe something that we didn't talk about that you'd like to ask a question on?
We had some questions in the chat I want to get to. Kyle made a point. He asked about what he said, sometimes you can have trouble or talking about yourself can be the hardest part. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that when you're talking about yourself in terms of job description or going up for a job or to a potential employer, I want to refer you back. You want to use those power words to describe what you're doing. You want to tell about your soft skills, those transferable skills that you've learned over time. So it's not bragging, because I too have had trouble with that growing up, because we were always taught, don't brag on yourself, don't oversell, or whatever the case may have been. But in terms of job seeking, you have to describe yourself in a manner so that the employer will see you as a good fit for that job. Okay, does that make sense, Kyle? Okay. Another question, Holly, was we had sharing surface level information. And what are our thoughts on people sharing surface level information about their families, especially when it's related to their availability?
Absolutely. So I think that's a good question. It definitely is your personal preference. If you are going to disclose that you have kids, especially in terms of scheduling purposes, yeah, you might want to disclose that. But you also might want to share that you have babysitters backed up and can work around as much as possible, but these are the time frames that I would be able to do the job. These are the time frames that I would not be available. And just reiterating that you do have childcare lined up, because a lot of times those biases will go into the hiring manager's head, where if they hear you have kids, they're like, okay, are you going to be calling off and you're going to be sick because your kids are sick, or they're virtual learning and things of that nature. So I think it's completely appropriate to share that information if you choose, but again, being careful and keeping those things in mind, and just trying to be solution focused, where you're kind of easing some of those concerns that an employer may have, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Holly. Do we have any additional questions from anyone before we point out some other resources and things? Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, can you hear me?
There you go.
Going back to something you talked about, I don't know, a while ago, but I was just waiting for a pause. You mentioned something about working in education and developing programs and stuff. Is that one way, if you want to work in education, to move up, to have some sort of initiative or drive you're about, or create a program to impress people?
I would have to say that it's not so much to impress people, but it's more to show your initiative to be a team player, to show how you to show your skills and how you may be able to put a team together, or guide a team, or work as part of a team. Holly, would you care to add to that?
Absolutely, I would agree. I think it's really important to be able to show that you can work as a team. So whatever you can do to support that is going to help you have that advantage.
Yeah, and even if it's in student organizations, you can still develop that skill in student leadership through our student organizations we have developed here at Ivy Tech. Definitely. Another question came up with attire. I had that written down also, Rachel. Attire. With attire, are there bonus points for matching the company's colors, or is that trying too hard?
I said go for it. Like, if you can incorporate some of those colors, even if it's just like a little pop, go for it.
Yeah. And then to piggyback on that, knowing where to go get, everybody doesn't have a lot of money to go buy the high expensive interview attire. So knowing where to go get cost sensitive items, or bargain shopping. I want to be real with you. I'm bargain shopping, clearance section. Hello, I'm all for that. I'm not above that. So definitely looking for those nice places you can use. I've used Walmart, gotten a nice button down from Walmart. a nice white button down in the clearance section. I've went to TJ Maxx. They have great clearance section. I'm not above the Good Samaritan. I'm not above the Goodwill. I'm not above any. I've actually bought things at the Goodwill too. So I look for the utility of the item that I'm buying. So if it's a nice shirt in there or a nice pair of slacks, I'm going to grab that if I have the chance to do that, because I don't want to have to spend $40 for 1 hour. I'm going to do an interview for 1 hour, and I just went and spent $40 that I really might not have right now. So just kind of being aware of the resources that you have and using those. One other thing that I wanted to tell our students is that we have a great tool here at Ivy Tech, which will help you put together all of this information that we just gave you in this professionalism event, and that tool is Hire Ivy. And I'm going to share that. I think I got it pulled up right. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right one. Hold on, let me pull that up. But it's definitely a good tool that provides you with interview skills. They help you put together your packet. Oh, I do have it pulled up. There we go. Share. Person. And I also put that link in the chat. So this is what this Career Coaching and Employer Connections of Central Indiana, and you can scroll down and it provides you different tools. They help you create this portfolio that we were talking about. A career coach to help you take those personality assessments and talk about those skills. And if you scroll further down, these are more in-depth services that they offer. Like I say, Interview Stream, Tradeify, Hire Ivy. And these are not only our job resources, but these are internship resources that you can use also. So definitely take advantage of that as you see need, okay? All right, let's make sure we haven't missed anything in the chat.
I think one question Ginny had thrown in there was ideas for questions to ask at the end of an interview beyond like the basic, like what are the next steps? When can I expect to hear from you? Da, 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 da. Like it maybe some more less streamlined questions that could be used.
Let's see.
So I would go back to say anything that's related to the position itself or anything that's related to the company. So if you are curious as to how you'll be managed in that position, because some people like to be micromanaged, they like a little bit more guidance, and other people just want that full autonomy where they want that flexibility to be able to do whatever they want and to do their job how they see fit. So that might be a good question to ask in terms of management styles, maybe not necessarily saying, hey, are you a micromanager or something like that, but being diplomatic and saying, what's your management style or what type of management style would I have with the person who's going to be supervising me? Questions along that line that kind of get you closer to having a better understanding of what it would be like to work in that role are really questions you want to focus on. And I would say a lot of those questions are going to stem from what you yourself find important in your values and what you want working for an organization. Because the interview is a great way for employers to learn information about you, but it's also a great way for the job candidate themselves to find out information about the employer to determine whether it's a good fit for them, because it may not be. So kind of going back to where if you're disclosing that you have a child and you might have to work around some of the schedules that they have, if it's going to be an employer who does not seem like they are going to be able to work around that, then you can identify whether or not that's really a company that you want to work for, and you might put your efforts into searching for something else. So I don't know if that kind of makes sense in a wishy-washy way, but I think it's going to depend a lot on what you want to learn about the organization itself.
Yeah. So yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, another question might be, what would your ideal candidate look like in this position? Or what type of goals is the organization working on? that this job description might fit into? How do they play into that role? So yeah, just to kind of show that you've thought about, like say, like Jenny was saying, thinking about yourself in that role or how it would look. Mhm. Yeah. We have another. Have you ever had a question in an interview that really took you by surprise? Yes, and as a matter of fact, Amanda did me like that in my first interview in 2000 and I believe 15 when I first started with the college. It was like,
I ask everyone that question.
yes, she said, "What is
Amanda,
your
do it in your
favorite type
voice.
of?" I'm sorry.
So here's how I do it. I go, Anthony, and then I pause.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say, what would be the theme song for your life?
Yes, and I'm like,
I love that so much.
and I'm like, at this point, it's Golden Girls. Thank you for being afraid. So yes, but my first question that you asked me was actually what was my favorite type of music, and that stuck with me, and I actually started using that in future interview hiring committees because it made me breathe. It really made me breathe at that point. So it was very effective in when you used it. Very pragmatic.
Absolutely. I love
Glad
when
I could
employers
help.
do that. Yes, because it does. It kind of takes the edge off, and it also lets employers know how well you're able to think on your feet, because that's not one of the questions that people typically prepare for.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that several people on this call have probably been on an interview committee where Jerry Harrell was either interviewing you or someone else, and he was always notorious for throwing these random curveballs. And so I remember when I interviewed for the assistant director position in career development, he asked me what my favorite childhood toy was. And I had to tell him that my favorite childhood toy was a Pee Wee Herman doll, that you did the pull string and he would say like his catchphrases. So that's one that definitely sticks out in my mind too.
I'm pretty sure we interviewed somebody in advising, and Jerry asked about the current water crisis in Flint.
Wonderful. I'm so glad I did not get that question. I will take the
Holly,
Pee Wee Herman question
That
over
makes
everything.
me so happy that that was your answer to that question.
Would have
Another
immediately been like, you're hired. No further questions.
another question that I've had some trouble dealing with or trying to answer transparently is, how long do you see yourself in this position, especially when you're coming in at an entry-level position? Don't try to fool the hiring committee, because they know what you're there. They know. So be honest when if you're coming into the company to advance yourself according to what opportunities they have available, make that known, because that shows longevity with the company. That shows that you're that's being transparent with that current employer, so they know how to plan for future occurrences, and also how to help you. They may want to help once you're on the job. They may be able to help you with an individual development plan to get you into the actual flow or pathway of transition through the organization. So definitely be honest and transparency. Okay, other questions? We're around about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I got a question.
Go ahead.
This is probably gonna sound weird, but I rarely use my phone, and aside when I'm, except when I'm at school, I have it turned on. I don't know, just in case of emergency. Who knows? I'm dying or whatever. When I'm at home, it's completely turned off. And during this presentation, you actually made me realize that I should probably create a voicemail. What should I say for that? How, like a professional sounding voice? I've never made one before, honestly.
For me, I always say I keep mine as simple as possible. Hi, you have reached Anthony. I'm sorry that I'm unable to answer the phone at this time. Please leave me a name and a number in which I would be able to contact you at my earliest availability. Something simple. You don't have to. You don't have to include in the voicemail that you're searching for a job, because I've heard people do that too. If this is an employer, please, you don't have to add that. Just a simple voicemail. Hi, this is Kyle. I'm sorry that you weren't able to reach me. Please leave a name and a number where I can contact you back in my earliest convenience.
Professional outgoing voicemail
Yep.
as well.
Having a great professional outgoing voicemail as well as that email address. Can we talk about the email address you're using on resumes and cover letters? It should be, like I say, it should always be the one. What, Amanda, what do you mean in terms of
As far as like AO 15 versus mom of 7 dogs at yahoo.com.
Okay. Yes, we'll refer back to that. So no hotsy-totsy at flywire.com. None of those. It should always be, like I say, your professional email.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So definitely making sure we stick with first, like maybe your first initial, last name, and if you think of a number to go behind it, at gmail.com if you need to establish one, or using your Ivy Tech email. Because I still have my undergrad email I use to this day, and I've had it since 2011. And to this day, anthony.jackson@students.jsums.edu. And I also remember my student ID number. We had to know it, like we had to have it. But yeah, so definitely take advantage of that ivytech.edu email, using that when you're doing job searches. I like to say that it might help me stand out when I'm when they're looking at resumes. I can't guarantee that, but use that school email. Okay.
Right. Any other questions before we wrap up for the night? You guys have been really great. You've asked really good questions and kind of kept things going. So thank you. And you guys are very patient, very professional. So thank you.
Yes. Amidst all of our technical difficulties, thank you for continuously tuning back in. Yes.
I've heard mention recently that one of the questions people are asking now as a follow-up at the end of their interview is like, what was your company's response like to like COVID or the shutdown, or however you want to phrase it? Would you recommend that? I feel like that's a great way to get a real clear snapshot of the culture of the organization.
I've not heard that people are asking that, but I think it's great. I think that's important for any candidate to know, especially, especially when you are going into an interview. It's not something that they anticipated, so just kind of seeing how they reacted to that, definitely a game changer in learning more about that culture and how quickly the company can think on their toes too, and how much they value their employees.
Yeah. Right. And also making sure you come out of, making sure you're, even when you're talking about COVID and how it may have affected the company, also you might want to highlight what you learned out of this experience, what knowledge you gained, what skills you might have gained. You may have never managed in a virtual environment. You may have never learned in a virtual environment or been able to. So definitely adding those skills to your resume. This COVID, it was not all bad. It did teach us some things and enable us to grow as employees, students, parents, things of that nature. But it's just according to how we look at it. So I really say, looking at it from that lens, what did I gain from COVID? My experiences. Okay.
I think I have one more maybe that I would love your input on, because students have asked me about this before. But when asked why you left your last position or why you want to leave your last position, how to answer that graciously if it hasn't been a real good situation.
I would say you definitely don't want to get into the details, but I think it's okay to say, you know, the company didn't really have the same values that I had, or it just wasn't a good fit. You don't have to go into the full details and start rattling off like, oh, this company did this, 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 and this. You never, ever want to do that. You never want to badmouth the company or anybody who works there. You don't want to burn any bridges. But I think it's appropriate to be honest, where you can openly say, you know what, it just wasn't a good fit for me. I'm looking for something that aligns more with my values and what I'm looking for. And then you can rattle off what those values are and what you're looking for.
Yeah, there you go. Turning a negative into a positive.
Yes.
Definitely. And still being transparent in the same manner. So definitely. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally agree.